Good afternoon. Hi, welcome to our session on World News Day. We're very happy to see you all here and happy to all be together in Perugia. My name is Kathy English. I'm here in my capacity as the chair of the Canadian Journalism Foundation, a not-for-profit organization in Canada that supports excellence in journalism through education, research, and annual awards and fellowship programs. World News Day, you may be asking yourself, what is World News Day? Well, stay tuned, you're going to find that out. World News Day originated in Canada, and we're here to tell you the story of its genesis and its growth. But most important, we're here to tell you how to get involved. We want to grow it, create a world movement that helps citizens, that helps everyone understand the purpose of journalism, why it matters, and how it can make a difference. So we have a great panel here with us today. I want to welcome each of them. I'll tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll jump right into our session. So at the far end is Natalie Turvey. Natalie is President and Executive Director of the Canadian Journalism Foundation. During the last decade, Natalie has enhanced the reach and the relevance of the CJF. She's developed new journalism awards, new fellowships, including a Black Journalism Fellowship program. Natalie has expanded our monthly public speakers series called J-Talks, which we do regular bring speakers in to talk about the importance of journalism. In 2018, Natalie designed the first ever World News Day. And she's going to tell you about that as we proceed. Beside Natalie, we have Madhav Chinappa. Madhav is Google's Director of News Ecosystem Development. Madhav works on partnerships and collaboration between Google and the news industry. In 2019, he launched the Digital News Initiative in Europe, and that became the inspiration for the Google News Initiative, which I'm sure many of you are well familiar with. Google's overarching framework for engagement with the global news ecosystem. Madhav has worked in the news industry since 1994, working for Associated Press Television and over 9 years at BBC News. Beside me, Sherilyn Ayrton is the Executive Director of the World Editors Forum. That's a global network for editors that's part of the World Association of News Publishers. Cheryl's a seasoned newspaper professional, having spent more than 20 years working in newspapers in South Africa as a journalist and editorial manager on the country's leading titles. Sherilyn relocated to the UK in 2005, owned and ran a London-based media consultancy called Press Links, which advised a variety of international organizations and foreign governments. Welcome, all of you. Thank you. And Natalie, could you proceed and show us the very first kernel of how we came to think about something we were going to call World News Day?
Can we cue the video? Thank you. Oh.
To join us.
Okay, we'll try that again.
Oh, shall I set
I
it
call
up?
it World News
set it
Day.
This, who you're going to hear from is my predecessor as chair of the Canadian Journalism Foundation, David Walmsley, who's also the editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail. When David became chair of the CJF, he stood up in an auditorium of 600 people and made this speech, and we've started from there.
I call on all of you this evening to join us in creating a global initiative to bring together journalists, our existing audiences, and the third rail, those who take us for granted without an awareness of what we do. I call on all of you in a year's time to join with me on the continents of the world to launch World News Day. Live events in communities, big and small, where we put the audience at the center of what we do. This isn't a fundraiser, it's an explainer. This is a call for our industry to come together and to fight together, to tell our audiences stories and the stories that matter. have already reached across the Atlantic and can announce right here and now that the BBC has agreed to be our global launch partner. Canada must light the beacon. And I ask you, will your companies and your news organizations, big and small, join us in this challenge of reminding the audience of the thing that is now more important than ever, that as journalism goes, so goes democracy.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be with all of you. So this is 2017, and this was my 10th year running the foundation. Every 3 years, we have a new chair, and every chair comes with a big, bold, ambitious idea for their tenure as president. And this was a big, bold, ambitious idea that also happened to be global, that fell in the lap of a 3-person, not-for-profit organization in Toronto. And I want to show you what we did with that big idea through a collaboration with the World Editors Forum and through the support of Google in giving us the runway and the belief in a day to honor the power of journalism to affect lives and communities around the world. Now I have another video, and I hope this will cue, if I can get some help to cue another video. I'm on, oh, I'm mirrored to, so how do I get to this one? Thank you, Madhav. Oh, right, this one. Okay, now I've got it.
And then you got to move that a bit.
Yeah. Good evening and welcome to World News Day. This evening we're going to hear lots of behind the big investigative stories from both the journalist and also the journalist subjects.
When I talk about the power of journalism and trust, it's not easy as a family going through something to share your story out loud into the world.
The very concept of free expression challenges us, the internet challenges us. Because believing in free expression really means accepting that there will be expression that each and every one of us in our own way finds uncomfortable.
Good journalism starts with a good story. Great journalism is when the telling of that story leads to powerful change.
We don't need a voice, actually. We have a voice. We have a very strong voice. We just need more microphones.
Your need for anonymity and my need to keep my privacy was so less important than the greater good for Canadian women.
This World News Day is unlike any other as we navigate through these challenging times. We look at how journalism coped, adapted, and pushed forward when one of the worst pandemics in human history hit the world.
We have to help get the facts out to begin with. We have to help separate the fact from the fiction. We have to help join the dots so that people can make sense of all these developments around them.
Today, we are thrilled to be joined by the audiences of some of the world's most prominent and prestigious news organizations. Newsrooms on 6 continents are honoring World News Day in their own unique way. More than 100 news organizations are sharing stories that make a difference, stories that need to be told.
Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without facts, you cannot have democracy. And that's dawning on everybody today.
The climate crisis is the greatest health issue of our time. Truth in journalism has never been more important.
In the midst of these stories, there is also hope. Stories from across the planet we share. World News Day 2021. Dispatches from a planet in crisis.
So that World News Day video gives you a sense of the spirit of the day. We need help. The spirit of World News Day and some of the faces and voices behind the stories that we showcase every year in our World News Day campaign. World News Day was created to demonstrate the power of journalism to affect positive change to lives and communities, and for the global news industry to show their value, show the power of their work to a functioning democracy and to citizens' lives. And the central magic of World News Day that we've found why it's galvanized with Global Newsroom is the smallest newsroom can show the positive change that they've affected in their community to a national news organization that has had an effect to legislation or people in power on the national stage. So that was World News Day. I want to just quickly take you through World News Day by the numbers. It was there? All right, here we go. So in parallel to our tentpole event, we have a social media campaign taking place where newsrooms from around the world are participating. And this is how we started in 2018 and how we ended up in 2021. 500 global news organizations took part in our celebration of the power of journalism. Our first tentpole event was held at the CBC in Toronto, where we put the audience at the center of the day. We had subjects of stories speaking to how journalism changed their lives, temporary foreign workers who talked about how coverage of their situation changed their living conditions and their working conditions. We had a mother speak, a mother who had lost her child to suicide due to cyberbullying, who spoke to how the telling of her story changed cyberbullying laws in Canada. But we had 19 news organizations taking part in our first effort in 2018 in launching World News Day. And we had some actions across social media. In 2019, our next iteration of World News Day, we saw participation from US organizations at the height of the Trump era and the fight for truth, where journalists were working to convey the truth in a flurry of misinformation. And we had 40 global newsrooms start to take part in our campaign. More actions across social media, but we still weren't galvanizing that global journalism community around this day to showcase the great work that they're doing. So at the end of 2019, we went to Paris and approached the World Editors Forum, a like-minded organization with a global network, to join forces with us and take up the mantle in sharing our World News Day campaign. What we didn't know at the end of 2019 is that by March of 2020, we would be entering a global pandemic. And our theme for that World News Day was journalism through a pandemic, showcasing how journalism kept communities safe, how communities were getting information in real time about the pandemic, about hospitals, about vaccines. And that's where we started to see our launch velocity. We had 186 newsrooms join us that year. We had Dr. Fauci on our stage speaking to how Anthony Fauci speaking to how journalism supports the work he does as a public official and others. And we started to see this really galvanizing actions in the millions, where news organizations were surfacing their journalism that was making a difference, that had impact. And following that year, when we thought we were moving out of the pandemic, our theme was to focus on one of the most pressing issues of our time, telling the story of the climate crisis. And again, editors from around the world, from Alessandra Galloni at Reuters to Catherine Viner at The Guardian, joined our day to speak to the importance of journalism in conveying the climate story. And this is where we hit our 500 or more newsrooms, from the Fiji Sun to the Financial Times, sharing their journalism that matters, and saw our campaign reach millions on social media across all channels. We had organizations like the Reuters Institute, ProPublica, and others sharing World News Day, promoting World News Day across their platforms, which brings us to today, where we're calling on you to take part and join us in 2022 and share your journalism that matters and your great work.
Okay, well, we're going to get to some details about how you can do that, but Matt, if Google News Initiative supports, engages with, promotes the global news ecosystem. Google was with us when we were just 19 news organization. Why has Google been a supporter of World News Day?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you, Natalie, and thank you to be here. Yeah, I'll answer that question sort of in two ways, if I may. One, the obvious corporate way, and then one personally, if I may. So, you know, the Google News Initiative is our overarching framework to help enable a sustainable, diverse, and innovative ecosystem of quality journalism. And within that, we kind of think about the three pillars that we do. We have products and tools, we have training and research, and we have innovation and community. And this sits very beautifully in that community element to it, because it was an idea that came from Natalie and David Walmsley, and said, you know, can you help bring the community together in a way that they haven't done before? And we just need some help on that. And it's interesting because you know, I've been lucky enough to work for Google for a while, but before that I was at the BBC, and before that I was at AP. And in the conversations I've had over the years, I think there's a real sense of community within the news ecosystem. I mean, everybody I have talked to is so happy to be here in Perugia, finally, right? And there's a real spirit of that community. And I think that World News Day is a manifestation of what I'm hoping everybody in this room feels. I'm feeling a bit privileged because I'm luckily enough one of the people allowed not to wear a mask, but it is nice to see people in 3D, right? And nice to see that community. And we think it's, you know, really important that we can help that community in that way, because as you outlined, I think that understanding and explaining the power of journalism and the power of news is really, really important, as David said, especially to the people who take it for granted. And that's where, you know, on a personal level, as a news person, I think that the news industry has sometimes been a bit shy about its own self and its own power and its own impact. And no, you don't want to kind of beat your chest and say, aren't we wonderful? But I think we can take a few more steps to actually show how important it is and how relevant it is. And I actually think the pandemic has been, you know, one of the silver linings of the pandemic, and let me be clear, it is a horrible thing, but I think one of the things about the pandemic is that people have understood the importance of journalism, of information, of news. And I think, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was talking to publishers, and some of them were saying they were petrified that this was an extinction level event, right? In some of the conversations I've had here on the streets of Perugia, people are telling me these amazing stories about actually how they have been able to thrive because of it, right? Because they've risen to the challenge. And for me, that shows the power and impact of news and the resiliency of news. And World News Day is an expression to just actually celebrate that. So that's why we support it. Sorry for being long-winded, but it's sort of from the heart.
No, that's wonderful. And at the same time that we've come out of the pandemic with a sense of the power, we also have what David called the third rail, a public that you know, there's research indicating increasing news fatigue. Is this a response? Is this something that can help engage news consumers?
I would really hope so. You know, the Reuters Institute will be coming out with some of, you know, their latest research that we help sponsor as well. And, you know, you're referencing the news fatigue, but I don't know about everybody in the audience, but I've had news fatigue, and I'm a news person. You know, sometimes it's just been too much, right? And that becomes difficult. And I think the difficulty is once normal people, not people like us in the news industry, but once they switch off, it's very hard to get them to switch back on, right? You know, if you're a news person, okay, maybe you dip out, but you do dip back in. And so I think World News Day, because it's framed in a positive, impactful way, as opposed to a good God is in the world, horrible, and look what's happening, right? I think actually it's a balanced way to show the negatives as well as the positives, and that for me is the real power of news and of journalism.
Okay, thank you. Sherilyn, 2019 World Editors Forum gets involved. How do you engage editors from around the world within your association and get them to take up the call to action for World News Day? So you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll move into what we're going to do in 2022.
I think our involvement with World News Day began in Asia. Specifically, we were launching a regional chapter of the World Editors Forum, and much in the same way that David had a presidential campaign, Warren Fernandez, who's the editor of the Straits Times, was looking for a campaign that could galvanize editors in the region. And at a Newsgeist event, the idea of World News Day came up, and it was a no-brainer. There were so many touch points around community, around... I think what really resonated was that it was the Trump era where there was a lot of criticism around fake news, and media was really feeling it. And yet in every newsroom there was journalism that they could be proud of, that had touched the lives of people and had actually made a difference. And I think when you talk to editors about that and say, why don't we surface that journalism and showcase it? And I think if you put it that way, editors see that it's really a project worth supporting. So we started in Asia. The initial World News Day was held around May 2, which is the day before World Press Freedom Day, which diary-wise was a little bit of a challenge. So in the first year we had 2 World News Days. We had May 2, and then the Asians came along. The Asian chapter was formed at the same time, but it was too soon to join that year. So we had a second iteration of World News Day on the 28th of September. And the following year we re-looked at the calendar and came up with the idea that World Press Freedom Day was an established day on the journalism calendar, and that holding it close to the Universal Day for access to information was maybe a better idea, because journalism needs information, and it played very strongly into the theme of having information for your journalism. So that year we combined forces with the Canadians, and we came up with a universal campaign for World News Day, and it's grown ever since. And I think the ask that we make of publishers is whatever you can. For some people, that's placing an campaign advert in the newspaper. For others, it's writing an editorial. For some, it's a really full-on community event or engagement. We've had fantastic support from projects like young photographers getting involved, certainly in the climate change event last year, where we ran young, we didn't run them, but we joined forces with universities to run competitions for climate change journalism. And it's really about giving people the tools to make of World News Day what they can. For some people that's little, for others it's large. And I think the more examples we've got of successful campaigns, so the momentum will grow.
Okay. So 2022 is coming up. World News Day will be on September 28th again. Natalie, how does someone get involved? What are we looking for?
So before we get to that, Kathy, I have one more piece to share. I pulled my notes from 2018, 2017 when we started this, and when we were launching World News Day, I went out and canvassed some of the big journalism thinkers and people that are, I'm not going to out them, but people that are on our program for this conference in Perugia, to say, what do you think of this World Newsday. And they tend to be a pretty cynical lot if you've met some of them. And Kathy, I pulled my notes, and a lot of those folks that I spoke to said there's a compelling business model for World Newsday in 2017, 2018, that if you can build a strong emotional connection with your readers, if you can build trust, if you can convince them that you share a passion for something, then they will believe in you, they will subscribe, they will become patrons, they'll support your news organization. And World Newsday is that way to connect with an audience, to ignite passion in them with your story. So they say, this is a place that shares the same values that I do. They care about the same things. And, you know, as Madaf outlined, the future can look bleak, but if you share your worth with your audience, you can make them care, and you can make them see the value in your journalism. So just a pitch for the business reasons to get involved in World Newsday. We have a global coordinator who's now a global manager. He's been with us for 3 years, who will collect your stories, feature your stories, package your stories, and share them across our social media campaign under the hashtag of World Newsday, Journalism Matters. I know, Sherilyn, you work closely with Alex Jones, and maybe you want to share more of how we are going to be featuring pieces of impact journalism this year.
This year, I think we're starting to get a little ambitious in that we want to do a lot more packaging and sharing of stories in formats that people are accessing. So it's all very well to showcase beautiful text-based pieces, and we'll do that on the websites, but we also want to take it up a level and share it in sort of more bite-sized social video and social packages that people can themselves then share on their websites or whatever. So we're looking for contributions, firstly to share with us a piece of journalism that you're proud of. We can share that with other publishers. We've had a lot of cross-publishing over the last 2 years, where, particularly in Asia, there's a culture of sharing other people's journalism. We want to grow that. We want to try and make the formats and that easier for people to share. But then we'll also ramp up the social media campaign. The other element of the campaign that has really worked, some publishers don't like sharing other people's journalism. It's just not in their ethos. But they are happy to contribute advertising space. So we've got campaign adverts, campaign messages. And for some, it's just a question of on the day asking their social media team to flag their own journalism, whether it's on their social media sites or commit a newsletter to your audience to tell them, remind them of some of the journalism that you've done that has really made a difference. And I think for those of you maybe regionally or in areas where they do more community engagement, to actually invite people into your newsroom or invite into your studio and take the subject further. It's, as David said, it's an opportunity to explain your journalism, the backstory of what you do, how you do it. And I think underlying everything we do is to try and push that point about journalism you can trust. Trust is, obviously for us, it's a big issue. When you say it to the public, they don't really see it in the same way we do. But if you demonstrate journalism that has made a difference, it does make the point.
And I'll just amplify that and amplify Natalie's message. I think the second year of World Newsday, I used my then public editor newspaper column at the Toronto Star, where I was. I did a call to action to readers in advance and said, you know, send me a note telling me why journalism matters. And, you know, I thought I might get 20, 30. I got more than 500 heartfelt responses from readers about how journalism had made a difference to them. They're expressing their appreciation for news, for what journalists did. The editor-in-chief was so blown away when I showed it to him that we ran it like a full 2 pages in the newspaper, because it was so powerful to see this is our audience, and it was like sort of that they like us, they really like us, and you know, that invitation to engage with your audience and create that community is part of the World Newsday ethos as well. And will we have Google involved this year?
I'm very happy to say yes. But I think the more important question is, will we have you involved?
Yes.
I'm just curious, who in the room has been involved with World News Day? Could you put your hand up just for fun? Excellent. We have one.
Who in the room might get involved this year?
There we go.
Who in the room will get involved?
Who in the room didn't put their hand up at all? You are the third rail.
Yes, yes, we're going to move into questions, but I just want to ask one final question of our panel, and I didn't prepare you for this one, but in the book Good to Great, the author talks about every company, every campaign, every initiative needs to have the big hairy goal. What's the big hairy? How do you go from good to great? What's our goal? What are you going to do to make that happen?
Can I try and take this? Because I actually would go back to David Walmsley, who came up with the original idea. So David Walmsley's big, hairy, audacious goal was he wanted World News Day to be the journalistic equivalent of Live Aid. I don't know, most people in this room are too young to remember that. But
He thought we'd be at Wembley Stadium.
Yeah.
By now, we're not quite there, and we have had a pandemic, but that was his great, big dream.
yeah. So if we can get to Wembley Stadium, that's pretty good, I think.
Okay.
I think we control the campaign, and that the big thing would be to lose control, to have every person, every newsroom take it up as their own and have and use our messaging and actually just grow it organically. I think that's the best prize.
Okay, and I will say I was in the room when David made that speech and then sort of dropped it on Natalie to sort of say, you figure it out. So Natalie, you did design this from the outset. Where do you take it?
Where do you take it? Well, I think our collaboration with WEF was a game changer. And again, Matt, if I'm going to say we had the runway from Google, knowing that every year we can continue to grow this. My big goal would be to see this on every editor's editorial calendar every year. And as Sherilyn said, taking your own actions from open days to resurfacing stories that matter and losing that control of World News Day. There's no ownership here. It was really galvanizing a day to celebrate the great work you are doing, big and small, in your newsrooms all over the world.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to questions. Yeah, there's no micro. No, I think we can't.
So you repeat.
We can't pass the microphone, so I'll repeat the question.
It's a crazy idea listening to what you're saying. So I'm Lara from Jordan, and so ever since the 17th century, we've been consumed by news. We've been seeing news every day, and now we've reached a point where we're overwhelmed with news, and we need a break from news, and we can't tell the fake news from the right news, and we need to restore facts and democracy. And what if this day, you and the 186 organizations just went blank, to give people a deep breath to decide how to, just like reset our brains, to remember the values of true journalism that is missing today? What if it was a message together from across the world? Because we're so all the time consuming news. That would strike a huge message, just like Live Aid, which I remember. Eradicating famine and raising money for good causes. That's something that is in our memory. What if newspapers that are valuable could do that? Do we have the courage to just state that there's nothing today? I'm sorry. Think about how you consume news. Think about validating your news before you read everything that you see and say is true. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, I'm just going to repeat the question, which is a audacious idea on its own, that perhaps for one day we just go dark, go blank, white, that there is no news on that day, that is the day we help the public understand with no news. So I'd be interested to know what this panel thinks of that.
We did that in Mexico, tried.
I think.
It didn't work very well. We did it. I mean, 8 journalists have been murdered in Mexico.
Of course, yes, yeah.
And so a lot of more press freedom organizations did it, and some outlets, but it didn't have enough impact, and it was really, really hard. Every year we try to do it because so many journalists are murdered in Mexico
I know.
every year, and we've never been successful in getting more outlets to do it.
didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I think it's it ties into a self-censorship message. I think there are papers that have done it powerfully when the need is there to be silent. I think in our world, if we go silent, the space will be filled by others, and that's the danger, is that you're handing over to messages that you maybe can't trust. So.
And maybe, Laura, part of that is turning this on its head and sharing positive stories on that day. There is, info bloat, infodemic, you're right, we are, confronted with pieces of news and information 24/7, our eyes and ears, and maybe this is a day to focus on the positive impact of journalism.
And the stories that have made a difference to your community. Matt, what do you think? What would Google do with no news on a day?
I'm happy to say that's an editorial call, so it's got nothing to do with us.
Good point. Other questions about how to get involved? Ideas? We'd love to share ideas. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sonia from Slovenia, and my question is, how successful are you around Europe? Because we actually had a similar idea in 2017 also on one of the conferences in Sarajevo, which was Evans Foundation had organized the conference, and there were people from many European countries, also some journalists who have been laid off recently, and before that winning awards for their work. And the idea was, okay, can we do a campaign European-wide and tell people why we are important, what we are doing for community-wide journalism matters? I mean, I really love the positive side of the stories. I think this is a really great idea. But the thing was that everybody went really cynical and said, first of all, we will never get together to do it. And, nobody really cares. So the idea was basically nipped in the bud. So I was just wondering, how successful are you in Europe? Because you mentioned Asia, you mentioned Canada, and I would like to know.
Okay, so the question was about how successful we are in Europe at building this community. So I'll let the panel answer that, but I think there's a good answer.
I think Sherilyn can speak to Europe, but the big difference was, yes, Europe can be very siloed and there isn't a lot of collaboration between countries. I think translating our materials and our messages made a big difference. And I think, Sherilyn, I'll let you speak further to that, but if I recall from year 1 to 2 in Europe, that made a huge difference. And champions.
I think it's a slow growth. I think some of the more, the bigger brands, it's a harder sell to convince them to get involved. But we've had success. We've had The Guardian, we've had Financial Times, we've had Reuters, we've had, there are a good few good brands in Europe that have been involved, but it might not be in the same way. They might choose to we had a lot of them participate in interviews, give us the editor's voice into a campaign. So it's different ways. It's not that you're going to open your newspaper and everyone is going to treat the campaign in the same way. We don't. We just ask people to do what they can and what feels right. And at the end of the day, the aim is to we can talk to the newspapers, but what we're asking is that the newspapers talk to their audiences, and that's the growth that we're looking for.
Can I just make a comment on that, which is I think there's a lot of kind of group dynamics involved. And I think it's, if you look at the numbers, it's building, right? And actually, on some levels, you got to have patience when you're at the small numbers to build. And so I really hope that, with what's happening here, with all the work that the panel is doing, that actually, the graph is going to go like that. The graph is like that. It's like, does it go like that or does it go like that? And, hopefully with all of yours involvement, it will go up and to the right, as they say.
And we hope you'll be our ambassador in Slovenia.
Well, what we did do last year, which made a huge difference, was engage other journalist organizations. So we have a lot of supporting partners. And what we ask of them is that they amplify to their journalism partners. So it's not that there's a central point of control. It's that branching out of support that we're looking for.
And to that point, it's not just about you, which is great. We hope we can have the Slovenian chapter, but it's also who do you think they should all be talking to, what associations and what other things?
We have a question at the back, and then I'll come up to you. Yes.
My name is Hassan Sulkari. I'm the former head of BBC Arabic, and currently I am running an initiative for the last 2 years to create democratic spaces for audiences in the Middle East to be engaged in the news and to be engaged in the current information system that we have. My question to, particularly to Mada, is about the change of the definition of news from the time when you were in the BBC to how it is now in Google, and now we see a shift whereby audiences are an integral part of the news ecosystem in the sense that their trends, their views are actually an integral part of that. When it comes to your event and the engagement with it, are we talking about news in the hard sense, the way the newspapers and TV channels cover them, or news in a different sense where communities are also part of the news information ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the way I see it, and I'll hand to the others on the panel to answer better, is that it's news as defined by the individual news organization, right? So if you are a local community news organization that is active in the community and doing that, that may be your definition of news. If you're at the other end of the spectrum and maybe The Guardian, you've got a different definition of news. But I don't know, Cheryl, if you want to add to that.
Yeah.
Natalie.
It's loose.
Yeah.
It's whatever matters. I think we've been blessed in the last 2 years by having two really big global issues to focus on. Firstly, through the pandemic, and then climate change. And I think that moment may have passed. I think it's rare to get big issues that everyone can focus on universally. So I think this year we're going to ask whatever matters in your community. If it's climate change, use that as the lens to focus on. If it's something more local, if it's migration, if it's whatever, use whatever's at your disposal, and whatever's top of your news agenda that really makes that connection between your news and the audience. That's what needs to be focused on. For the campaign to work, needs a level of emotional engagement.
Natalie, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree with what Cheryl saying, and I don't see the downside to this. It is really showcasing the value of your work. It doesn't cost anything. It's an email, and we want to share the good that journalism does in the world. And Cheryl, it is, you're right, it is loose, but this is the aim of the day. And we hope you will join us.
When we say that, though, obviously, this evidence-based, facts-based journalism is what we're trying to promote, not opinion or not anything else. So anything that speaks to stories that you can be proud of, that meet the definition of ethical journalism, I think is what we're after.
Yes. A question over here, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Jake Ginsburg from the Committee to Protect Journalists. This is great, and it's lovely to be in a session that's about positive things.
Yay!
I have two very quick questions and a comment. The first is, there are obviously other days, like World Press Freedom Day, and I just wonder how far the existence of other days, where lots of other people are doing, is potentially dilutive, and whether there's a potential to collapse some of these things. The second thing is whether you're able to measure a change in people's attitudes who are not already preaching to the converted. So you're talking about these communities, but the people we want to reach are the people who've gone off journalism, and whether this day can potentially measure newspapers' abilities to reach outside the people who are already in their grasp. And the third thought is the big hairy goal, therefore, ought to be has this rebuild trust, actually? Not can we fill Wembley Stadium, that's great, but actually can we rebuild trust and build the case amongst more people for supporting journalism?
So, Kathy, we have three great questions. I'm going to lob the first one over to you around World Press Freedom Day, because I know it was very dear to you in your journalism career to speak to why we moved away from that day.
Sure. Well, as a journalist for many years, World Press Freedom Day was always a big deal in the newsroom, and there was always, it always came, newspapers I work for, straight from the publisher's office. What are we doing for World Press Freedom Day? So I felt that that was an important day already on the news calendar, and when it was initially launched, I did express some discomfort around that, around those competing priorities, even though the goals are very, very similar, but I could see some room for confusion. And then I know that you two can talk about why it was moved to September 28th, but I think that World Press Freedom Day is a model. In my mind, it's a model that World News Day needs to have as much impact. I think that there is enough distrust, news fatigue, all of those negative things about news. I think there's enough to sustain more than one day, and that we can amplify throughout the year the importance of why journalism matters.
And I'm going to skip to your third question, then we'll get to the middle question around, are we preaching to the choir already? The folks on Twitter and across platforms who are consuming reliable, credible news and information. What we also attached to the campaign was a celebrity element, and it is helpful for a number of reasons. We had Macy Gray, Grammy Award-winning international musical artist, sing a song for World News Day. So in the promotion, you're promoting her along with the day, which are going to get eyeballs and attention from her fans. We had, I don't know if you recognized Victor Garber of the movie Titanic fame, attaching Victor to our World News Day as well. And it's another way to raise attention for those folks that maybe aren't consuming those same news outlets, to draw their attention to the day. So we've talked about getting more on YouTube this year with the 2022 campaign, and working with some influencers there, more work on Instagram as well to try and touch those communities that we aren't already reaching.
I think in terms of big, hairy goals, the aim would be, hopefully, that at some point it gets recognized on a UN calendar alongside Access to Information Day. I think our advice has been that it's a difficult process to get a day recognized, and that it's better to work with an existing date than to try and recreate one, which is why we're sitting on September 28th. So ultimately, I think David is it's one of his life ambitions is to have it as a globally recognized day. What we'd like to do is to try and get schools involved and educational institutions involved, so that it is not just our normal audience, it's people with their own reach, and hopefully they can take up the message.
And we talk about that a lot, about how do we move beyond preaching to the converted, for sure. You have a question here?
That was actually my question.
Okay.
I think the thing, we need help. That's why we're talking to you.
Back here and then up here.
Hi, Kate O'Brien with the Scripps Network, my mother. I came a couple minutes late, so maybe you addressed this from the beginning, but you seem to have a big tent and are welcoming all into it. What is your vetting process for news organizations that are opinionated, or say that they are fact-based, but in fact are opinionated? How are you figuring out to accept it or not?
So, Sherilyn, I'm going to let you do that one, because I know you worked with our global coordinator on, around our vetting process.
We start with a community that we mostly know. So, with the World Association of Newspapers, we have members, and that's our first step, is to try and engage that. But we don't make a judgment on their content. When the content comes in that we do publish, it's not a great fact-checking exercise or anything like that. It's the fact that it's been published in the it's public material that has been published. So there is an element of trust in that we resharing stuff that hopefully, if there has been kickback or anything, that we'd be aware of it. But I've just learnt of an incident that happened last week with a separate news organisation. There is a risk to that. So we hope at this point that our trusted partners will share material that has withstood criticism.
A question up here?
Yeah, no, it was pretty much the same question, because I was quite afraid, even in pretty polarized
can get weaponized by, media that perhaps they are not trying in the everyday.
Sure.
They are not attaching to engage.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very much like perhaps not the appropriate, but an after process, like saying, hey, sorry, this media joined this year. Are there any processes or whatever that other media could follow in order to say, hey, perhaps next year you should.
Mm-hmm. I think we all see the risk, but it hasn't emerged as a major issue at this point.
No, because for example, in our country when COVID began, it was all about, well, let's all talk about, fact-based news and everything.
Of course.
And then everything started to just dismantle. And
Of course.
where is the editor's responsibility? Where is it going? But
Yeah.
But yeah, I know it's
Very good point. Well, thank you everyone for your participation. We have left cards on your chairs. There's a QR code that takes you to how you can participate. I invite you to please look at the World News Day website. If you look at this past year's, you'll see some great journalism on climate change. Please, I hope every one of you will somehow be involved in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.